You'd think they can hear you when you're only talking to yourself. So what's not going out is the session on the Open Meetings Act. Secret session on the Open Meetings Act.
I remember doing something online. I remember doing something online. Was there anything else we did online?
No, there's nothing else.
I attended this training in this conference on the open meeting.
I didn't.
There was one here in City Hall.
It's like a series of questions.
By the time we totaled up,
Doesn't this qualify?
No.
I think we have audio. Good evening. This is the Evanston Plan Commission. We started our meeting, but apparently there was no recording. So we have declared a quorum. We have 7 members present. The minutes were approved, and we were just beginning a presentation by the City Attorney, Michelle Mason-Cup, on the Open Meetings Act when we discovered we were not being recorded.
Good evening again. I was just discussing that the public bodies under the Open Meetings Act include the Plan Commission and its subsidiary bodies. And the basic definition for a public meeting is 3 parts. It's a gathering of a majority of the quorum and to discuss public business. So, for example, the Plan Commission has 9 members. Your quorum is 5 members. A majority of the quorum is 3. So anytime you have 3 or more members, you have a meeting. And that is, we'll discuss later, circumstances that also constitute a meeting. The city provides a regular meeting schedule on its website. Annually, we have to do this under statute for all of our boards and commissions to make sure that people recognize where they are, what time they are, to make them sure that they're convenient for the public. If we have a special meeting, we have to provide at least 48 hours notice in advance to make sure people are aware of the special meeting that's outside the scope of the regular meeting schedule. The agenda has to list items more specifically than litigation or special use application. It has to give details to give people an understanding of what's going to be discussed. It has to list, for example, special use application at 2404 Ridge for this business. And so people understand that if they're interested in this, they should go to this public meeting and hear the deliberation. If the discussion starts to veer off into a direction that's not listed on the agenda, sometimes the law department gets a question and guidance, can we take action on that item that just came up? No, you can't, because it's not on the agenda. You can discuss it, but you cannot make any action on it. If it's a special meeting, you can't even discuss it. If it's a regular meeting, you can go back to it and properly notice it on the next agenda. The logistics of the Open Meetings Act, a lot of these city staff members have been well versed in this, and they'll make sure that we're in accordance with the state statute. But some questions that sometimes come up: can we hold a meeting in a different forum than at City Hall? Can we hold it in, if we want something more casual, can we hold it in someone's home? No, you can't do that because we don't know if there's adequate parking, if it's available for people with disabilities, and if it's just a forum where people feel welcome to come and join the meeting. Minutes must be taken, and people that come to the meeting can also make a recording. They can bring their own audio equipment and record it as well. This is something that's come up with the development of technology. Email. When people press reply all, when they CC people, you have to be very cautious not to do so, because if the discussion starts to turn into a deliberative nature when you're discussing things that are on the agenda, it actually is a meeting if it becomes a communication in which it's contemporaneous, when it's instant communication. If it's in a chat room, the Attorney General looks at that like it's a meeting. Even though you're not physically present, that constitutes a meeting. So please try to avoid that as much as possible. Closed sessions. The Plan Commission is one of those bodies that I can't envision situations in which you would close your session. One example could potentially be litigation. but it can't be something that's speculative or remote. It has to be a real case in controversy or a potential case that we think is actually coming. That's really the only scenario that I could think that would fall into the statutory categories. There's 29 categories, and they are very specific. And how you actually go into a closed session is that you're in open session, you make a motion to go into closed session, you deliberate, and then you go back into open session and make the action. That's how it works, but city staff will work with you in the event that that ever comes up. But that is a scenario. People could move into closed session. Attendance at meetings. I've not read the Plan Commission rules in a long time, but you are able to, if your rules provide for it, to participate in a meeting only under limited circumstances. If there's a quorum present at the actual meeting, then people outside the meeting can join it electronically if you have one of the statutory reasons and it's in your rules. If you have an illness, if it takes you away for business, or if you have a family emergency. And those are the only circumstances in which you could attend remotely. If the city has allegations that we've actually violated the Open Meetings Act, there's actually two forms that people could make those allegations. They could file it with the Public Access Counselor through the Attorney General's office, or with the Cook County State's Attorney could seek to prosecute the city for civil penalties and criminal penalties if it's severe enough. This is not a training on Robert's Rule of Order.
Excuse me, has that happened?
It has happened, yes. The city currently has 2 allegations for Open Meetings Act violations, but the Attorney General has not ruled yet. And we represent the city in those circumstances. So you just have to be cognizant that this does happen, and it's currently happening. And we want to ensure that the commission, if you have any questions at all, please contact the law department. Ken Cox is your staff attorney, but if you have any questions, you can always feel free to contact me. That's my email and my phone number, my direct phone number at the city. Any questions? And just to refresh that, this was off the tape, but please do your training at the Attorney General's website by December 31st. Yeah. I mean, it says Rodney Green, but please turn it into Craig.
The statute and the ordinance have a fairly extensive notice requirements for matters that we handle in addition to the Open Meetings Act requirement. So our practice is to continue matters from one meeting to another. I assume that if it's published on the website and the city follows the usual notice requirements, that's satisfactory.
That's correct. Are you continuing it to a special meeting or continuing it to a regular meeting?
Both happen.
Okay.
Sometimes, but it's always a date certain.
Okay. If it's a date certain special meeting, then it just needs to make sure that there's 48 hours notice of the agenda. If it's a date certain, then it's already on the schedule. It's just that the agenda needs to speak specifically to the actual agenda that's been continued.
And it would normally some item is under consideration and it
Then
just
that's
gets
correct.
continued, so we don't have to republish
Yeah,
and send letters to everyone within 250 feet.
that's right.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner
Question?
Sure.
Yeah, on the zone committee of the Plan Commission, it's 4 people for a quorum. If 2 people are talking, is that considered a meeting if they're discussing some item outside, or is it 3?
Well, it's a majority of the quorum, and if you have 4 members, your quorum is 3, but then your majority of quorum is also 3. So if you have 2, my advice would be to abstain from that.
We've been, I thought, instructed that we can talk one-on-one.
You can do that.
We can talk one-on-one.
Yes.
Okay, so that's
Your
2.
mic is off.
Oh. Okay, so we've been instructed we can talk one-on-one, so that's 2.
Yes, that's right. What? It's a trick microphone.
There you go. I'll just hold it up.
Of the plan commission you're talking about, you can talk one-on-one. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So the plan commission has 7.
You have 9.
9. Boy, I can't add.
The quorum is
A quorum is 5.
Quorum is 5. The majority of the quorum is 3. So one-on-one is 2.
Yeah, so I've always gone under the operative that can only talk one-on-one.
For the smaller committees, would that preclude anyone speaking to an alderman?
Alderman. They are outside of the body, so yes, you could speak with them. But it can't be, again, it can't be 3 of the aldermen together with 1 commission member, because then they would be meeting as their body.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Anybody got like a text or anything on it?
It was answered.
I had
Just the microphone. We're on tape here, Rich. Come on, nobody carries like an all-purpose tool?
The next item is Evanston Comprehensive Plan discussion. Craig Sklar will address us.
Good evening. Craig Sklar, General Planner, City of Evanston. The last several months, the Comprehensive Plan Subcommittee of the Plan Commission has been meeting at a very early time on Wednesday mornings. Our next meeting is Wednesday, October 17th at 7:30 a.m., just for your notes. What we have attached today is sort of a rough draft of the introduction chapter of the revised comprehensive plan. What I've also put in front of you tonight is a draft table of contents that the committee has worked on that I have slightly revised only to place them into 4 sections similar to the existing comprehensive plan itself. So it's more reflective of an update rather than a wholesale reconfiguration. Some items of note that the committee has discussed is pertaining to land use, combining housing and neighborhoods into one, as a conversation that housing is synonymous with a neighborhood organization, and while there are other land use discussions in a neighborhood, the primary use of those neighborhoods is housing itself. Dividing out business, industrial districts separate, as they have different types of needs and planning issues. Adding downtown Evanston, it was previously called the Central Business District, but people understand it as downtown Evanston today. Under public facilities, we've reorganized it as parks and open space, public facilities, and public infrastructure pertaining to anything like gas, water, sewage, roads, the nuts and bolts of the community itself. Part 3 in and itself is transportation, to discuss all modes of transportation, not just, it was previously called circulation, which wasn't descriptive enough to really talk about some of the modern needs for that. Part 4 is what's called community environment. That includes the historic preservation, sustainability, and a reference to the area plans themselves. Of note, we have been discussing how to integrate area plans into the comprehensive plan. From my research, what I find most communities do is create an addendum to the comprehensive plan that attaches each area plan to it. So you don't have to specifically integrate those area plans into the comprehensive plan, as they tend to be much more specific and localized. But we can reference them currently to derive general policy should they reflect something that is a citywide change as well. Commissioner Scher.
If you're, one of the plans, the specific plans, is not in accordance with what we have in the general plan, which one takes preference, the way you're putting it in?
We need to address that specifically
Well, I
in
think we looked
the
at,
section on that incorporates them. And it doesn't have to be the same for all parts of all plans. Usually the specific would take precedence over the general, but it's something that when that section is written, we should specifically address, but there may need to be exceptions.
Does that answer your question? And then lastly on this, what we've discussed were sort of major themes. That includes economic development, transit-oriented development, sustainability, and the arts. Now, I know that says sustainability twice, that we have a specific chapter that would deal with sort of climate change, technical goals and objectives of the community itself under the climate action plan that was derived as an area plan. There are some general policy elements that we can place into that chapter, but these major themes, as the committee had discussed, were sort of woven throughout all chapters in the comprehensive plan, and that would have some sort of significance and calling out as we move forward. So I open, does any of the committee members wish to speak to our efforts currently and moving forward?
Is there possibly a way to differentiate the difference between the two sustainability sections when you're in the table of contents, so that you don't perceive that as being either a contradiction or a duplication? Or
we could call the actual chapter like climate change or something to that effect, since that would be dealing more with those specific policy items that deal with the climate action plan itself.
Yeah, the other way to do it might be to address the major themes in each chapter and then have some conclusions. I have some comments on the forward.
Boy,
there it goes.
you break the switch,
Sorry. Just to touch on the comment, I think Commissioner Galloway asked a question about sustainability under major themes, and then I think the response was potential characterization of it as climate change or something. It's my understanding that sustainability is more than just climate change. It encompasses pretty much, I'm assuming everything, trying to be more eco-friendly, green-friendly. So
correct, and that's why I stated the whole climate change component, because I think that chapter, from what I remember, was more of the technical parts of sustainability, and that sustainability as a holistic term is an interwoven theme throughout the rest of the comprehensive plan.
Okay. What are your, in basically developing this draft, your thoughts on the usability of the table of contents? Who's going to be the intended user, and are they going to, find this, usable? I think it is usable, but if you could maybe talk about that just briefly.
The comprehensive plan has multiple audiences. I think a casual user would be able to use this table of contents and be able to quickly flip to a section that may have of their interest. A developer that's putting in their plan development application will be able to look under the specific pieces that they're looking for. Let's say for residential, you're building a new residential development. They'd be able to first flip to housing and neighborhoods and find those components, and then to climate change to see if there's anything that they would be reaching under that. So specific goals that they're looking for. Under the introduction itself, it is my intent to have all of the goals stated clearly, sort of as a narrative forward, as you saw in sort of the very rough draft graphic layout that I provided to you as an example, so that you can essentially take that as your executive summary. So it's my intent under the design of this that we can pull apart chapters and create them in themselves a singular document for perusal. Having microphone issues today.
Barb?
Button issues. So to go back to the question about major themes, or the comment about major themes, do you see major themes as being a separate section or intertwined within each of the parts?
I see major themes being addressed, and we have not written it yet because I feel like it's sort of, we have to reverse engineer this document a little bit. I see it as a small 2 to 4 page section in the introduction itself to address what those themes are, why we are calling those out as special themes and not their own individual chapters. But I don't know. One of the pieces that I found frustrating with the current comprehensive plan is that they spend a lot of time saying you can find this information in this chapter or this information in this chapter. And my attempt is to cull that down to, this is the housing chapter. We're specifically talking about global issues concerning housing and neighborhoods in this chapter. The next chapter is transportation, and it specifically addresses that while recognizing those holistic components.
The themes.
Yes, the themes throughout.
Okay, so the way you've set this up here, it's not going to be a separate section at the end.
No, this is more for a discussion item. I don't know if the table of contents would look exactly like this when we're done, but these would most likely move into sort of a item F under the introduction, major themes.
Okay, that would make more sense to me. I just wanted to be sure that was where we were headed.
So if I understand this correctly, each of the chapters will have some kind of evaluation of the policy based upon its how it addresses the major themes.
There will be a discussion item based on those major themes, but not wholly. Each goal may not be evaluated against a major theme, but there may be a component of that theme within the chapter itself. So I think there are things specific to each chapter that we could try to have touch each of the major themes, but sometimes they are stronger standing on their own.
Mm-hmm.
This is where your icons were going to come in handy, wasn't it?
Yeah, the whole development of the document will take on a more graphic form over time to really call out attention. A lot has been made in the advancement of publication procedures in the last 12 years. So we're going to be able to do a lot more visual representation of these items, including updating all the maps, all of the charts, graphs, and adding more of those elements that is easier for people to read and understand what we're trying to get at.
When I look at the forward, I'd like to see something about the unique and positive qualities of Evanston. I think it's a pretty unusual place, and I like it a lot. And then maybe a discussion of some of the challenges. So, for example, in unique qualities, we have some great institutions. We have the lakefront. We have a diverse population that's really unusual and great, both ethnically and in terms of income. We have the existing transit connections to Chicago, which are extraordinary. Building on the transit connections, there is the possibility for transit-oriented development. We have some. the literature and theories of transit-oriented development have changed a lot in the last 20 years. We understand much more about how to buffer uses that are next to each other, which used to be separated with large distances in the old-fashioned zoning. I think there are some real opportunities for transit-oriented development improvements in Evanston that don't exist in many other places. In terms of economic development, we have some significant needs. Transit-oriented development's one of the possible ways to meet them. We have a tax base that includes a lot of tax-exempt real estate, which is unusual and poses some challenges, and the need for economic development. Certainly the theories and outside knowledge of sustainability is an issue that's really changed. And so these kinds of things at some point probably should be incorporated into the forward. I like your theme of change. Both change external to Evanston that we face, such as change of technology or some of the other things I've mentioned, and internal change. Another change issue that probably should be in the forward. The proportion of older population is changing nationwide and in Evanston. Our current housing supply doesn't contemplate that. Our current zoning is not consistent with that, and there too it is a fit with transit-oriented development. Before the meeting, someone mentioned Iowa, and I've had the sad experience of being in Iowa in homes and places where the older population is living, and they are completely isolated from everyone else, and our densities are sufficient, and in areas where there's good transit, that isolation isn't necessary here. Another piece that we might want to address. So those sorts of things come to mind as reasons to look at the comprehensive plan, and eventually probably should make it into the forward. I sort of touched on the three major themes, but I haven't touched on arts. And I could say, we have strong arts programs here. And I think the intent of the committee is to reference it and sustain it. So those are things that I would eventually like to see incorporated into the forward. Maybe not now, maybe after we've have more content for the various chapters.
If I could tag on to some of your comments. Given Evanston's unique and positive characteristics, and given the inevitability of change, would it be worthwhile to reference how Evanston has significantly changed over its history as a way to communicate to people that, the changes that change has occurred, and the city has evolved and still succeeded, right. So that change is not something to be foreboding about. And then maybe to add.
Could I address that? Just one quick answer is that there is a very significant section on Evanston history. It's almost 2 pages, single space, and my intent is to work with our historic preservation planner to beef that up a little bit more, to talk about that change. I don't necessarily know if it needs to be in the forward itself, because the forward is just more of a half-page document in itself, but definitely in the introduction there needs to be a discussion on history.
Or maybe reference, I'm just thinking that to reference that Evanston has gone through periods of significant change in the past, and it has only become a better place to live, and that sometimes it's difficult for